Hey everyone, today I'm creating some cards using the October 2024 Sheetload of Cards template. I am part of the creative team and there will be a playlist below that will show you all of the different creations from the rest of the team, and we all do a totally different take on the design every month, so it's worth checking those out. Now for this one you'll see there's small patterned pieces of paper, and so I am going to use up loads of scraps today to make use of everything that's kind of hanging around in my scrap box. The other thing I decided to do was to use this big book of, neutral toned cardstock. I am going to chop all of it down to 5¼ by 4" panels so that I have a really nice stash of backing panels in some really kind of neutral tones that I can use on future projects. So I will use these today, but I will also have a huge stack of these that are going to be ready for anything that I decide to create in the future. There will also be a few scraps that I get to use later on that perfectly match those card bases. Now, this is my scrap box. I do not cut all of my scraps down to 1¼ strips. This is from a project that I did many years ago. So these patterns are all quite old, but I'm slowly working my way through this box. And for this particular project, I decided to pick some of the browns and the teals. And you can see here some of the yellows because they match perfectly with the neutral tones. The first thing I did was cut things down to 3 inches wide. This is basically because per the original sketch, it did have a panel in the middle with a full border around the edge, and everything was 3 inches wide with a 3¼ box. Because I'm really not a huge fan of having uneven borders around the edge of a card design, I decided to kind of do a few different alternatives for this card sketch, and you'll see what I mean after I've cut down some of these papers, how I kind of merge them all together to create a few variations on the original card sketch. So here for this one, I'm literally cutting down these gorgeous gold flecked butterfly papers, and then these ones have kind of a shimmery effect with just the script, so you can't actually read the text, but the tones of these two pattern papers, even though they're not from the same collection, match really beautifully. And I'm going to use these with the kind of khaki coloured backing panel, so it really makes the yellow pop, so highlights it really nicely. The other thing that I did was when I created the panel for this particular one, I decided to use the full panel with the 4" width. And so you can see that I cut down that thin strip of paper. That's because I'm doing my panels right here as per the sketch, which are the 3" ones, and I'm putting them on the right hand side of the panel. And then on the left, I'm going to put I think it's a ½ strip that fits perfectly straight down the side. So you can see here with the ones that I've created them the standard size that I would to have a 1/4 inch border all the way around the edge of a standard A2 white card base. But then I have used kind of the sketch with a little bit of a variation. These yellow ones are so pretty, and at this point I'm trying to work out what am I going to do for a sentiment and an embellishment on the cards, and I really wasn't sure, so I just focused on creating some of the panels, and then I put the whole project aside, and then I came back, created a few more panels, and then put that aside, and then I did just finish doing the rest of the cards earlier this afternoon, so I cut it really fine with when I was launching my video today. For the next one, I decided to try using the actual width of the pattern papers. So I have quite a few specialty papers that have some foiling on it, and I didn't want to chop it down too much and lose the design. So for this one, I had this really pretty paper with apples, and about half of the apples are foiled. And so I decided to use those with just the plain green. And then the strips here, they work absolutely perfectly, fitting with a really nice gap between each of the pattern papers. So this was the second variation that I did on the card design. For the third variation, I actually decided to make the width of the panel, the backing panel, as per the sketch. So it is 3¼ wide, but instead of having it be 5 inches with a tiny little white border around the card, I actually made it 5½. So it goes straight up the middle of a white card base and then has 2 white strips down the edge as the rest of the card. So hopefully that makes sense. I think in a moment I do put one of the panels onto a white card base, and when I do that you'll see what I mean. In terms of what I did with these strips, I didn't measure anything. I just chopped everything up, and then I'm really just making sure I've got a consistent gap between each of the pattern papers, and then I'm mixing up the 3 or 4 different teal designs so that I create a card that looks pretty interesting. So you can see at least one of the panels here is the 1¼ inch, so there is a wide space on each one, and then other than that, I'm just using whatever I have. When I got to the last piece, I didn't need to make sure it was perfect because I could just trim that down so that it fitted on the card. So here you can see me lining up that panel straight down the middle of the card base, and it's got the 2 white strips down the edge. So I haven't attached anything yet. I'm just creating a pile of panels on the right, but now I know exactly how that's going to work once I'm ready. Now I'm moving on to the 4th design, and I apologize, I'm a little bit off the bottom of the screen here, but this time I am doing a landscape or a horizontal card, and I'm using whatever panels I have in front of me, and I'm just trying to figure out how to make it work so that the gap between each of the pattern papers is pretty consistent. You'll notice when I was putting down that other piece of paper there, I had a gap at the top of the card, which is now the bottom, that was not going to work. I could not fit anything on. So I decided to place the pattern paper as close as it needed to be to the edge. And then I used one of those super thin, I think it's like 1/4 inch strip that fitted into the gap perfectly. And it was a perfect complement to these particular pattern papers, and also it was a nice leftover from one of the previous designs that I was doing, so that was a double bonus. If you're enjoying the video, it would be absolutely fantastic if you could hit the like button. That is how YouTube knows to share the video with more viewers, and if you'd like to see more content, then please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and then you'll get notified when I launch something new. All right, this is when I got to the point where I was trying to work out what I was going to do for sentiments, and I have a whole pile across the top of the cards there that are from my stash, but I also got a few new dies. I did a bit of a splurge at Simon Says Stamp, and I've got a couple here that I was choosing from, and because there was 5 different ones, I really just went through and said, okay, how am I going to narrow this down to only a couple so there's not so many choice? And I went with the really simple hello and the really simple thanks. It does probably look a little bit odd how I'm doing my die cutting here, but I have all of these scrap strips. And so I mentioned earlier when I cut down the backing panels, this sort of charcoal grey colour is a perfect match to the matting layer on the teal striped card that I designed. And so by doing the sentiment in exactly the same pattern paper, or the same, cardstock, that means I know it's going to be a perfect match. So I'm just putting this through my little Spellbinders Scout, which I absolutely love. It's so cool to not have to get up from my desk. And because it folds up on both edge, I can just put it on the shelf behind me, grab it, do some quick die cutting, and away I go. And a lot of dies do fit straight through this without needing to use the bigger machine. So definitely loving this so far. So you can see here I'm doing the white as the base layer or the shadow, and then I'm doing the primary color being the charcoal in this instance as the top layer, and I'm able to do those in one go. Traditionally, I would cut them out with the die still connected like it is, and I would do all charcoal, all white, all charcoal, all white, and then I would mix them up. So I had some that would do the inverse, but I didn't need to in this case, and it worked out absolutely perfectly because of the scraps I was using. You can see here that I'm just lining up the thanks on top of the shadow, and it takes a little bit of fiddling, but I can line it up and sort of nudge it to where it needs to be just using my fingernails. So I didn't have any problems putting these together. And because I was using quite heavy cardstock, they were quite robust as well. The thing I like about this hello die is the actual shadow is really quite thin. And so by having the contrast of the charcoal grey and the white, so it is a very big difference, I found that this was a different look than I was used to from a similar item from Birch Press, which was my foil sentiment plate, which I think you'll see in a moment because I do use that as a spare on one of my cards when I am completing the series. So really simple. I decided not to use any embellishments on my cards today, just some sentiments, and then just let the papers shine. I specifically picked some of my designer papers that were foiled or had something a little bit special about them, so they do look really pretty in real life. I think those ones with the thank you sentiments would be perfect sort of teacher appreciation cards, especially with the apples. I thought that was super cute. So here we are with the teal, and you'll remember earlier I mentioned that I have the 1¼ inch strip, and there's at least one of those on each of the cards. And it was a happy coincidence that it ended up being the perfect width to put the sentiment. And I did not bother about whether the sentiment was at the top or the bottom of the card. I simply put it wherever that strip was, and I didn't have to think about it, and it just looked fantastic. So for these wide ones, I've just used these layered thanks and put them across again wherever that wide strip was, and they worked out really nicely. For these ones here, I used some of the thank yous, and so these again worked out really beautifully. Do you know, if I'm using thank yous here, possibly for the other ones, I had the "you're so amazing" sentiment, but either way, both would be great for teacher appreciation cards. This one here, I created it with the gap that was intended per the card sketch, and I was wondering what on earth I was going to do. But luckily, I just had a couple of spare sentiments, and they matched up. The number I had matched up absolutely perfectly with the number of cards I had left. So I was able to finish off my project with fewer leftovers than normal. And that one on the top left there, see how it's got a wider border around the hello? I think the hello is the same size, but it is the foil version where I did a whole heat foiling session and created a load of those for a separate project. I've put another video here that I think you might enjoy. Have a great day.